Aneace Haddad is an executive coach and an advisor to the C-suite. He's also the former CEO of two tech companies, but found himself really drawn to the people side of work. He's also written a recent and lovely book, The Eagle That Drank Hummingbird Nectar, a novel about personal transformation and business leaders. And today we chat about integrating mindfulness into your leadership, your team, and your work. Hello, and welcome to The Communicative Leader, hosted by me, Dr. Leah OH. My friends call me Dr. O. I'm a professor of communication and a leadership communication expert. On The Communicative Leader, we're working to make your work life what you want it to be. So, Aneace, thank you for joining us today. And before we dive into the ins and outs of your view of mindful leadership, can you tell us a bit about yourself? So, what brought you into a career and a passion for leadership?
Great. Okay. Thank you, Leah. Wonderful meeting you this morning or this evening, your time.
Yeah.
I came at this late in life in a very roundabout manner. I was a tech CEO for most of my career, built a payment software company in the south of France, grew it to 30 countries, sold it in 2007, just before the global financial crisis. I thought I was going to be a serial entrepreneur, but I discovered I liked people more than computers, and it was just it was quite a difficult transition to let go of all that. And in that same period, I was meditating a lot more, practicing mindfulness, and then at some point, by the time I was 50, so 2010, just 3 years after selling the company, it all kind of came together as a more sustainable leadership style by combining mindfulness and not so much the meditation part of mindfulness, but much more of the self-awareness involved in that. So it was roundabout. I could go on for a long time on that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. And, it talks about the organic nature of leadership and how there is not a one size fits all approach. It's figuring out who you are at that moment and how to be the best version.
Yeah. And interestingly, at the time when I was going through that, it was still a bit esoteric for a lot of leaders.
Mhm.
When I was running my company, I had no coach. It just wasn't a really big part of culture, of the corporate
Mhm.
culture at the time, to have coaching. Now
Mhm.
everybody has a coach.
Mhm.
And and something has shifted over, especially over the last few years, maybe with COVID and a lot more complexity.
Mhm.
It's like leaders have discovered that they need to be far more self-aware than in the past.
Mhm.
They need to be far more cognizant of their own emotions, how they're doing, how their people are doing. Not
Mhm.
only on a wellness perspective, but really, what are we sensing as a group? How are we responding? How is our level of trust
Yeah.
between each other at the
Mhm.
top? Ownership. This is a really big
Mhm.
one recently. How do I take ownership beyond simply my functional responsibilities?
Mhm.
And how do I interact with my peers? Uh,
Mhm.
and there's a
Yeah.
huge amount of mindfulness that's needed for
Mhm.
that to happen.
Yes, exactly. I love it. As a leadership communication scholar, it's fun to see people recognizing the power of, like you're saying, intention and communication and how they impact others. And,
Yeah.
we have to address these emotions, not let them lead the way.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I'm noticing, just as an anecdote, a
Mhm.
few years ago, when you ask people, executives especially, how are you feeling? What do you feel
Mhm.
about that? They say, good.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Good or bad. Yeah. I have two
I
options. Yep.
And
Yep.
then now they're starting to get a lot more. I'm noticing people kind of
Mhm.
on their own become
Mhm.
more discerning in what the
Mhm.
emotions that they indicate, and that
Mhm. Yeah, and
I'm
and feeling,
cool.
yeah, able to share that as well
Yeah,
in the workplace.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I love it. Well, perfect. So we know a bit about your background. Your passion for leadership is clear. Can you help us understand your take on mindful leadership? So, how do you conceptualize it? How is it different from maybe other approaches to leading?
So my particular approach on that, and I'm not talking like a generalized approach of
Hmm.
mindful leadership. My particular approach and the kind of work that I do is that it is a form of leadership that allows us to have a much more holistic view of who we are in the organization and who we are in the world. There's a lot of overlap in personal life, a lot of huge amount of overlap and impact on society.
Hmm.
So there's a sense of once we become mindful of the impact that we're having, and we go beyond simply our functional remit. Um, yeah, for me, mindful leadership touches into all of that. Uh,
Hmm.
it's so, and a much more simple word that I've often heard executives say, it's just being more human. Uh,
Hmm.
I've
Hmm.
heard that expression a lot from people
Hmm.
that wouldn't use the term mindful leadership.
Hmm.
Uh, just being more human and
Yeah.
allowing myself to be more human, less of a
Hmm.
robot. Um,
Yes.
especially with AI and ChatGPT and everything like that, they're going to take off over all the
Yeah.
robotic type of
Yeah.
executive roles.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So we should lean into the human side for very many reasons. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I
for
think
me,
that.
mindful leadership is kind of a technical term for
Yeah.
a more human way of leadership.
Yeah.
That's just kind of
Hmm.
take.
Yeah, and I like these, holistic, this idea of being responsible, of being intentional. I mean, these are things that I think, virtually anyone would say, yes, those are things that I want to be connected with. I want people to think of these and think of me, right? Even if we're not using the word mindful leadership, but the attributes certainly you can kind of get by
Yes.
in that way.
Yes. Yeah. So I often, as I mentioned earlier, meditate a
Mhm.
lot. I've gone on retreats. I've done
Mhm.
all of the very woo woo kind of
Mhm.
stuff, but you can't, that kind of language is very hard to bring
Mhm.
executives on
Mhm.
over the bridge and on a journey.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
and you don't need that. There's a lot simpler language,
Mhm.
exactly how you just described it,
Mhm.
that people intuitively say, "Yeah, I want that. I see why we
Mhm.
need."
Yep. Yeah. Excellent. And so, with this in mind, I mean, we've kind of touched on some of these things, but what do you think organizations and work groups, what would they kind of look like or feel like if most of our formal titled leaders were practicing mindful leadership?
Yeah. Again, for me, based on the way I'm looking at it, the angle that we're just talking about right now,
Mhm.
um, for me, it translates to a far greater shared ownership of results, collective
Mhm.
ownership of
Mhm.
results in the broad term, not just the
Mhm.
financial, but the
Yep.
holistic kind of results. Um, in an in you would see it at the very top levels, at the C-suite, where conversations are far more organic as opposed
Mhm.
to the CEO interacting at an executive committee meeting, for example,
Mhm.
interacting with the functional heads and the
Mhm.
other functional
Mhm.
heads staying quiet during that
Yep.
interaction.
Mhm.
You would see a lot more
Mhm.
sharing of ideas, even outside of
Mhm.
one's area of expertise, and yeah, a lot more mutual ownership of where we're going, a lot more mutual
Mhm.
ownership of creativity, innovation. Um,
Mhm.
another word is enterprise leadership as
Mhm. Yep.
opposed to functional leadership. So
Mhm.
my way of looking at things is mindful leadership is very linked to that. I don't think that's I don't think that's a formal definition of mindful leadership, but yeah,
Oh, well, that's it's nice for you to share how you see these connections and help other people kind of make those connections and view it in those ways.
like my
Yeah.
book,
Mhm.
"The Eagle That Drank Hummingbird Nectar."
Yeah.
It's been described as a novel or manual on mindful
Mhm.
leadership, but I never mentioned the words mindful leadership
Mhm.
anywhere in the book.
Yep. Yep. I have it downloaded. I cannot wait. It looks incredible. But yeah, exactly. And so I think that idea of, it's one of those things, it kind of reminds me of this idea of being healthy. And it means something different to everyone. But when we feel how we just know it, we're like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm feeling really good. And
Yeah.
maybe it's sleep, and maybe it's diet, and maybe it's meditation or who we're spending time with. And I think the same thing with mindful leadership. It's, there isn't one precise way of getting there, but we can recognize, okay,
Yeah.
everyone, like you said, ownership and intention and that agency, that buy-in, it means so much to employees of all levels.
What I love and how you just described it right now is that the terms you used and the image that you just evoked is it's founded on a trust in people's maturity and ability to make these decisions for themselves and what does healthy mean to each person.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really big part of the shift.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Mm-hmm.
trusting our people that they do know what's best, as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
the old way of command and control. I know what's best. I'm going to tell you.
Yep.
So
Mm-hmm.
you didn't say those words, but it was just I was struck by how infused that idea was
Mm-hmm.
behind what you were saying.
Yeah. Thank you. And this leads us, I think it's a really natural segue to my next question when we're thinking about this link between mindful leadership and wellness at work or self-care at work. So, can you kind of talk to us about how you see those connections being made or how they could be made?
Yeah. Well, I can speak of it, and I need to be careful that I'm not a health person.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
people that are struggling with issues that they need a doctor for,
Mm-hmm.
anything I'm going to say right now would not apply
Mm-hmm.
at all.
Yep. Yep.
So it's more the general sense of wellness in an otherwise healthy environment where people
Yes.
are.
Yeah.
So with that
Mm-hmm.
caveat,
Mm-hmm.
the way,
Yeah.
I think it's very linked to what we were talking about just a moment ago. Is this okay? All right, so it links to a shift that I've noticed in senior leaders that um, at the tops of organizations, traditionally people at that age level tend to have teenage kids,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm generalizing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the way they come to their management style feels a lot like managing teenage kids.
Mm-hmm.
KPIs and
Yeah.
consequences, actions, and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. That if you do this,
Mm-hmm.
that happens, all that kind of thing. You go to the board level, at that level, they tend to have adult kids.
Yeah.
And they've learned that when you're leading
Mm-hmm.
kids, you cannot use the
Yeah.
same
Mm-hmm.
methods.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm seeing a desire and a need for leaders, even at the C-suite level, to adopt that style more faster,
Mm-hmm.
and break out of kind of the decades-old mindset of we
Yes.
manage
Yep.
our teams like we manage
Mm-hmm.
teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that managing like managing full-grown adults as teenagers leads
Mm-hmm.
to a lot of unwellness, if you like.
Yes. Yep. Exactly. Yeah. It's so funny you mentioned that. I just published a paper. We asked like 60 managers, what is your metaphor for managing? And then what does that make your work group? And we also asked members, what is your manager? But one manager said, I'm a parent of teenage boys. I manage as a parent.
Yeah,
Like it makes and she thought there were a lot of pride for her. It's
yeah,
like, I love my boys. I love my team, but
yeah,
I give them these strict parameters. And then if they've earned more responsibility, but, yeah, when
yeah.
we're reflecting on it, like as an adult, do you want to go to a workplace where someone views you?
As a
No,
teenager,
no, yeah.
yeah,
But yeah, those exact same terms that you used. So yeah,
yeah. Seeing
fascinating.
that repeatedly,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily expressed in such stark, clear terms as you just
Mm-hmm.
expressed. But once I saw it starkly expressed like that by a CEO in
Yeah.
Europe,
Mm-hmm.
um, And at the end of the conversation, I asked them, "What if?" But they're all adults; they're not
Mhm.
teenagers. And then
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
could see the light go on in
Mhm.
his head.
Yep.
And then since then, I've heard the same thing, but not as starkly. And then when you
Mhm.
bring it up, usually people
Mhm.
go, "Yeah, of
Mhm.
course, they're not teenagers."
Yes. Yeah. Yep. But yeah, you're right. It's so hard, especially for thinking about traditional MBA programs and the literature that's that foundation. It suggests that you should take that approach. And
Yeah,
we know it's changing now, but it is hard to break out of those molds.
yeah. And much of the literature is written by people with teenage kids.
Yes. Yep. Yep. Exactly. Well, I'll
And
have
I
to send you
simply
that
find that.
manuscript. Yeah, the metaphors are phenomenal to consider how
Yeah,
people conceptualize that.
yeah. And from what I've seen, as soon as people are aware of that, they shift.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Yeah. Yep. Because we think I'm just thinking about how the the manager is thinking of she was really proud. And then when
Yeah,
we circled back, she was one of who elected to be a member check. And I'm like, are we interpreting this? And she's like, wow, I realize that that's not my role here. That's my role outside of here.
yeah,
But you're right. It's, until someone points it out, sometimes we're not even aware that that's what we're doing or that we maybe shouldn't
yeah.
be taking that approach.
I've seen it in people
Mhm.
who don't have kids.
Mhm.
And that has led me to kind of notice how it's really embedded in our corporate culture,
Yep.
all the literature, as you brought
Mhm.
up. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh gosh. Well, still on this wellness idea, and we've done previous episodes on self care, and we've brought in a licensed professional counselor. So we've kind of flipped over that stone. But thinking about our formal leaders, what role do you think they have any sort of obligation to think about employee wellness at work or facilitating that in some way?
yes, definitely. Um, and again, I'm very sensitive to how people. I know that wellness. uh, It's hard for corporations to get behind the term
Mhm.
wellness because it
Mhm.
feels like just being nice and soft and fluffy and
Yep.
all that kind of thing.
Yep.
Um, when it's placed into the context of high performance, that
Mhm.
be you can't be at a sustainable level of high performance if there is not a foundation of wellness.
Mhm. Mhm.
When it's understood from that context, then I can't see how you cannot be
Mhm.
um, heavily invested in that.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, what it means in each environment, I don't know. I mean,
Mhm.
every leader is going to have to find their way, what it means to
Mhm.
them, what's in their
Mhm.
context.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that it's one of those things where both paths will kind of converge. So it's you can kind of take the human approach and say, this is the human, this is what we should do. We value our people. We've brought them in. They're doing a lot for us, and we're going to end up, impacting our ROI in a positive way. And even
Yeah,
if they say, I don't care about them as humans, but I care about performance. Okay, you're going to take
yeah,
this route, but we're going to end up at the same place. We're still going the
yeah.
wellness route. But
There's a story in my book.
Mhm.
Um, a man I had coached around 10 years ago,
Mhm.
managing director of a textile factory in India. And I made it into my book, but in a fictional manner,
Mhm.
name changed and industry and all that
Mhm.
kind of thing. And they were struggling with safety issues. They had had a few fatalities. Um, I was coaching him, but not on safety. I'm not a safety expert.
Mhm.
I was coaching him on commitment and as a leader.
Mhm.
And I asked him, so they had spent millions of dollars on global management consultants and
Mhm.
everything to build the dashboards for safety and everything. They'd done
Yeah.
everything you're supposed to do, but it
Mhm.
still wasn't enough. So I asked him, how would you rate your level of commitment to safety from 1 to 10?
Mhm.
He said, very high, probably a 9. I said, how about
Mhm.
your top team? He said, probably an 8. And
Mhm.
then the conversation became that maybe people were dying because it was a 9, not a 10.
Okay.
And
Mhm.
then he got angry. He said, I can't be 10 out of 10 committed because I can't be on everyone's backs. I've got 2,000
Mhm.
people. They do stupid
Mhm.
things. And then over the next few weeks, he started wondering, what is 10 out of 10
Mhm.
commitment to safety?
Mhm.
And I remember the session when he had his aha moment. He was really excited to have this coaching comment. He started talking to me. He said, a few days ago, we had an event. I was walking on the shop floor. An elderly janitor slipped, twisted his
Mhm.
ankle. I sat with him, waited, put my jacket under his head, waited for the safety people to come, check him out. He said, all of that was 9 out of 10. That's what I would
Mhm.
usually do.
Mhm.
However, the idea of what would 10 out of 10 be was in my mind. So when the safety people said he's fine, he just needs to go home and rest, he
Mhm.
said, I decided to take him home myself, get him in my car, drive him
Mhm.
home, sit with him and his wife,
Mhm.
made sure he committed and his wife would commit. He would not be walking on his foot for a
Mhm.
while.
Mhm.
And he said that was 10 out of 10 commitment. So the
Mhm.
wellness, really
Mhm.
looking after, really
Yep.
showing empathy
Mhm.
and desire for well. And things shifted in the organization because the CEO took it to that level
Yeah.
there.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. It's like that beautiful power of role modeling and recognizing we're always leading, whether we want to embrace that title and, the responsibility that goes with it or not.
Yeah.
Wow. What an incredible story. And I know that it was real. Wow. That is 10 out of 10.
Yeah. He wouldn't
Yeah.
have come at it necessarily from a wellness angle.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. Gosh. So that is a really incredible story of something that we can see in a face-to-face bricks and mortar workplace. And now we know that so many teams and organizations are hybrid or fully remote. So
Yeah.
thinking about that from a very pragmatic perspective, what would mindful leadership look like to you in a remote environment?
Yeah. So the immediate thing, I think a lot of people have gone beyond this, what I'm going to describe right now. But one of the immediate things goes back to the conversation on treating them as teenagers and not trusting them.
Mhm.
Initially during COVID, it was like, I don't know what they're doing at home. Maybe they're not even working. They're watching
Mhm.
Netflix.
Yep. Yep.
I need a
Mhm.
way to have the
Yeah.
cameras on all the
Mhm.
time so I can make
Mhm.
sure they're at their desk.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I think that that period subsided pretty quickly.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
wellness is involved with that, trusting them.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, I think that's the big one with online, with virtual. It's
Mhm.
so it is linked to another um, transformation. It's um, if you have a scale of 1 to 10, and 1 is I'm
Mhm.
delegating tasks, 10 is I'm
Mhm.
delegating results and authority.
Hmm.
Empowerment is further to the right,
Mhm.
toward
Mhm.
delegating authority rather than delegating tasks. In a virtual environment, you have to move a lot more toward up that
Mhm.
empowerment scale
Mhm.
in order for
Mhm.
wellness to be there. That you're not delegating tasks, you're delegating some end
Mhm.
result. And that's
Mhm.
what you're looking at, is the end result rather than making sure that people are at their desks and working.
Mhm.
So for me,
Yeah.
wellness starts with that. Um,
Mhm.
and if
Yeah.
people are truly empowered and you're delegating authority and results,
Mhm.
there's much more potential for wellness to emerge.
Mhm. Yeah, I think exactly. Because I think if we think of empowered as that space where we're really thriving, where we feel we have the resources and the support, then we're positioned to do our job really well. And then if things aren't going well, I think too, when we have the resources and support, we're also more likely to raise our hand and say, this isn't working, or I need help.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard. It's a learning process for both sides of that, the leader and the person being led.
Oh,
It's very hard.
exactly. Mm-hmm. And then related to that, kind of maybe thinking about this idea of either the leader or follower, someone who needs extra self care in their remote environment or virtual teams, what would
Yeah,
you coach someone on or an organization just saying, how do I let my teams know that this is important or they have options or that I'm here for them? What might that
yeah.
look like to you?
Um, um, how to answer that in a simple manner? There's so many. One main one main area is for the leader to model vulnerability and authenticity and
Mhm,
honesty.
mhm,
Um, it would so agency and all that is involved. It's a matter. It's a very subtle area. I wouldn't coach someone to say I'm here for you,
mhm,
because those words kind of imply lack of agency.
mhm,
So it would be more like um, it's a. I encourage check-ins a lot
mhm, mhm,
as a group. So
mhm,
starting a meeting or starting a session or something, there can be a quick check-in around the table.
mhm,
How am I? It can be very simple. How am I feeling today? Uh, what's in the way of me being fully present in this
mm,
meeting? Something
mhm.
like that. Very simple. At
Yeah,
first, it's clunky, but after a
yeah,
little while, it goes pretty fast.
yep,
Without any trying to fix the problem, without any solutioning, without any problem solving. It's simply a
mhm,
moment for everyone to share. And
mhm,
through that sharing, there's an opening up, and there's a because we're holding back from trying to fix the problems,
yep,
we're creating an environment of knowing that everyone is able to take care of their stuff, and they will
okay,
reach out
yeah,
if they need something. So it's kind of that became a process that was quite valuable during COVID when everyone was
mhm,
online. Just
yeah,
a quick
yep,
how I'm
yep,
feeling. Is there anything in the way of me being fully present right now? It might be I'm worried about my daughter at school or something, or
mhm,
and just simply stating that, knowing that
mhm,
nobody's going to come in and try to fix it, things
mhm,
just kind of move on.
yeah, yep, yep. And we think about the team dynamics then and knowing people. I mean, we're always kinder to people we know and we can empathize with, and building community that way goes a really long way. Yeah, I
People
I
become
love
three
that.
dimensional. Yeah,
Mhm,
people. If you become a community of three-dimensional human beings, and you see them not just as a
yeah,
role, but you see them
mhm,
as a human, and that's a lot
yep.
easier to empathize with them and connect with them and trust them.
Yeah, exactly. It made me think of this moment in the very beginning of the pandemic. I had my grad class online, and then my daughter was 3, and they were like, "Are you okay, Doctor O?" I'm like, I just think she's gonna poop. Like, this is time when she poop. It was at night. Grad classes were in the evening, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. My partner, he's working, and she's just gonna be sitting in her diaper. And they were like,
Oh,
"Oh, so nice to see you." And I was like, "Oh." Like, it was the first time they saw me rather than just Dr. O. And they're like, "Well,
yeah,
take a break then. No problem." But I just remember feeling like, okay, it's out there. We've said this. I might be running out to change a diaper and it's going to be fine. Everyone's fine. So, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So I experienced that and it was really lovely. So thank you for that
yeah.
reminder. So,
It,
and this is leading us. You have so many amazing leadership lessons, and you've learned these throughout this very impressive career. And I'm just interested how you've kind of parlayed all of this experience into writing a very lovely book, The Eagle That Drank Hummingbird Nectar. How did you kind of parlay that into a book about leadership?
I had I've always loved writing since I was a kid. I wrote two. payment systems books 20 something years ago when I was running my company. They're for that space. They're not necessarily
Mhm.
technical, but for that space, more strategy, marketing, vision books. But they were telling books,
Mhm. Yep.
like the vast majority
Mhm.
of business books. And I written a first version. I wanted to capture a book on my transition to leadership coaching, executive
Mhm.
coaching, team coaching, and I wrote very quickly a few years ago a version of that. But it was again a telling kind of book
Mhm.
with anecdotes and stories. And I threw it over. I didn't. It's boring. I didn't want to
Mhm.
write yet another kind of book
Mhm.
like that. I was very inspired by books like Lencioni's, where
Mhm.
Patrick Lencioni's books,
Yep.
Five Dysfunctions of a
Mhm.
Team, things like that,
Yep.
that have a mix of fiction and telling. But I
Mhm.
wanted to go further. I wanted to write a full fiction book with no
Mhm.
telling parts to it.
Yep.
And it turned out to be immensely harder than I had imagined. I had three
Mhm.
coaches as
Mhm.
I was working on it,
Mhm.
and it's quite difficult to get the telly. You can see in the way I'm talking to you, there's a very professor kind of voice that comes out
Mhm.
pretty easily,
Yep. Yep.
and I had to get beyond that voice in the book. So it was
Mhm.
it was a process of my own self transformation and learning how do
Mhm.
you tell a story and allow people to take from it what they want to take from it.
Yes.
Um,
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, it's like, kind of going from the teenage kids to the adult kids.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
It's very much in
Yeah.
that same spirit.
Mhm. Oh, excellent. Like I said, I have it downloaded on Audible. I just finished another book yesterday, so it's next in my queue. I cannot wait. So, I have two final questions for you. So, on the communicative leader, we like to leave our listeners with leadership or leadership communication tips. And I know we've already touched on so many. But first, I want to think about our titled formal leaders, our supervisors, directors, managers. What tip or suggestion do you have for those folks?
In terms of, uh,
Any,
uh,
leadership or communication, what do you kind
yeah,
of wish they knew or were mindful of?
yeah. So for that level of executive, of leader, one of the most powerful and simplest shifts, especially in the notion of communication,
Mhm.
is to flip that on its head. Um, so it's kind of like, uh, if you look at feedback as a form of communication,
Mhm.
people will come to me saying, I want to get better at giving feedback, giving effective feedback. People don't like receiving the feedback. I don't know how to do it. I need to get more skillful
Mhm.
at it. And I'll ask them, how skillful are you at receiving feedback and at
Mhm.
asking
Mhm.
for feedback? And they'll go,
Mhm.
oh.
Yep.
And so I'll have them
Mhm.
spend 6 months where they don't give any feedback at all, and they just spend all
Mhm.
their time asking for feedback from their
Mhm.
people and
Yeah.
getting skillful
Yeah.
at asking for
Yeah.
it.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and they will say, yeah, but they don't tell me the truth. They're going to sugarcoat everything. I go, yeah, that's the learning, is how do you create an environment for people to tell you honestly how you're
Mhm.
doing?
Yeah.
And there are little techniques, like rather than just saying, how am I as a boss? They're going to say, you're great,
Yes.
and
Yep.
clap for you.
Yeah.
You
Mhm.
could make it a lot more specific and say, I'm trying to be more empowering. For example, how would you rate me as an empowering leader from 1 to 10?
Mhm.
And they may
Yeah.
say 7 or 8. Then you could say,
Mhm.
great. What would 10 look like? Have you seen me at a 9 or a 10?
Yeah.
And then what's missing? How do I get there? So you become more
Mhm.
skillful at how you request that. And in that
Mhm.
process, you're creating an environment where people trust you much more because they see that they can be
Yes.
honest with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at some point, they will come to
Mhm.
you and say, how am I doing? Can you
Mhm.
rate me 1 to 10 in that
Mhm.
task that I was just working on.
Yes. Yep.
So I turn it on its head. Rather than you getting
Mm-hmm.
better at communicating and giving
Mm-hmm.
feedback, you're better at listening and asking for stuff,
Yeah.
and that's a
Yeah.
part of communication as well.
Exactly. Yeah. The power of listening, right, is almost always overlooked.
Yeah. And people
Mhm.
often think, well, listening, the other person takes the initiative to speak. And if they're not speaking, well, hey, that's up to them. They just need to speak. But no, as a leader, my
Mhm.
role is also creating an environment where they are speaking to me. And
Mhm.
at first, I might have to draw it out of them until they feel confident and trusting
Mhm.
enough to speak on their own. But if they're not
Mhm.
speaking, it's my role to create that environment where that is happening.
Mhm. Yeah.
So by
Yeah.
turning communication on its head,
Mhm.
there's a lot of richness to be pulled out.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. The learning, the role modeling, what it says to employees, the work group culture and climate. Yeah. Amazing. And with that, our next, so we've talked about our formal titled leaders, and now I want to think about a leadership tip or communication tip for employees of all ranks across industries. So if someone just came up to you at the supermarket and said, "Oh, that's so neat, you're a leadership coach. I don't want to be a title leader. Management isn't for me." Or now, what are some tips you would leave them with just to be more engaged or happier at work or whatever it is?
Wow, I think a big area there is to not underestimate one's influence around them,
Mm-hmm.
even without any title. If they're in any kind of role doing anything, well, I'm reminded of that old story about a janitor at NASA when they were getting ready to send the first man to the moon, and somebody asked him about his job as janitor, and he described it as I'm
Mm-hmm.
contributing to getting a man on the moon.
Mm-hmm.
So his way of looking at his role was much bigger. I've
Mm-hmm.
used recently an example out here, football, what's called soccer in the
Yeah.
U.S.
Mm-hmm.
People are. I'm not a sports guy, but people love football analogies and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And when you use the analogy of a player that is on the bench for the whole
Mm-hmm.
season,
Mm-hmm.
and if that player has an attitude of low ownership in
Mm-hmm.
the overall results of the team, then they're going to behave a certain way. Um, they don't. They have high ownership, and you may wonder why would someone sitting on the bench
Mm-hmm.
feel like they own the results of the team?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, they feel that because they're practicing with the team as if they're
Mm-hmm.
ready at any moment to jump in.
Mm-hmm.
They're watching from the sidelines, so when they're in the locker room afterwards, they're giving feedback on what they
Yeah.
saw.
Mm-hmm.
Their feedback has value because they're
Mm-hmm.
professional eyes that are seeing it
Mm-hmm.
from outside the pitch.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't underestimate one's influence in
Mm-hmm.
those roles.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, I think that would be the main little piece of advice, if that makes any
Yes.
sense.
Yep. Yep. And so powerful because I think people always say, "Well, I'm not the leader." And it's like, well, wait, you're always ever in my view,
Yeah,
everyone's always leading, whether they have the title or not.
me
But
too.
not the leader doesn't prohibit you from being
Yeah,
influential and inspiring and, innovating and all of those
yeah,
things.
yeah.
Excellent. Well, Aneace, thank you for joining us on The Communicative Leader. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I know our listeners will too.
Thank you, Leah. It was wonderful. I really love this.
Mhm.
I'm all excited and enthused. It's your evening. It's my day. So
Yes.
I'm going to start the day with a lot of passion.
Yeah, excellent. All right, my friends, that wraps up our conversation today. Until next time, communicate with intention and lead with purpose. I'm looking forward to chatting with you again soon on The Communicative Leader.